So I've spoken a lot recently as to how much I want to see some episodes devoted to background characters, but I have not really elaborated as to what I want out of that idea. So let's fix that. First questions first, how many episodes do we actually devote to these characters? Too many and we derail the show, but too few and well, what's even the point? I think we should only see a few episodes a season. After all, the CMC and Spike are considered secondary characters and they already don't get a lot of episodes, so it would only make sense to place background characters even lower in the totem pole, which would actually make them a sort of tertiary class, but that's besides the point. But of course, we don't want to miss anyone, so I think that it'd be most efficient to group these characters into pairs. It gives each someone to bounce off of and keeps us from having too many background episodes. Besides, fans have already grouped them together, be it for a ship or whatever else, so the job of actually pairing them up is already done for us. Lyrabon, for instance, are pretty much a package deal, and characters like Octavia and Vinyl, while technically separate, are almost always thought of in conjunction with each other. But then comes the important part. What do we even put into these episodes? Well, as you could probably figure out from the time counter on this video, or at least I hope you could, I, as always, have a few ideas. First up is my personal favorite of the bunch, Lyrabon. Now I know what you're all thinking, but contrary to popular opinion, I'm actually going to suggest the staff steer clear of that idea and continue the whole best friend cover story. The obvious reason why is that that sort of thing isn't exactly mainstream outside Western Europe and Canada. Putting it in a kid show will undoubtedly stir up unnecessary controversy in the rest of the world. I mean, heck, the Beauty and the Beast remake did for having LeFou dance with Gaston for a few seconds. Eventually, yes, someone will pull that trigger, a few kids books already have, but as much as I love this show, it shouldn't be the one to do it. The public threw a fit over Muffins being named Derpy. You really think Lyrabon will go over any better? So what takes its place, I hear you ask? Duh, I think the smartest idea would be to have the anti-monster agency be re-established, or at least somehow made relevant again. It would be a fun way to do a spy episode, but it would seem Season 7 already has that covered. Here's hoping. I also wonder if this would be a potential way to canonize Lyra's human obsession, which would only make her more interesting. Let's face it, she was a bit boring in Slice of Life. She does have to stand on her own as a character after all. But then that means we have to introduce humans into the show for Lyra to obsess over. As such, I think it really only makes sense to canonize EQG in the show. The only alternative is reinventing humans in Equestria after all, which seems a bit redundant. So how do we do that then? I think the best answer is for ponies to fear mankind as some sort of mythical beast. It'd explain why the EQG portal is kept secret, and by extent why it never came up in the show. I realize that the sirens are kept there, but that doesn't explain its secrecy. The public is allowed to learn about every other threat, so as of now, it's really for no good reason. This could also be a useful vehicle to develop Lyra and Bonbon's relationship without, well, canonizing it. If Bonbon, and by extent the rest of the agency, assuming they're a thing, sees man as a monster while Lyra thinks differently, then we have a great source of conflict, and in turn, character development. They could just as easily call each other best friends as they've been doing, and this story thread remains unchanged while also adding a bit of depth to said relationship. People aren't perfect after all, and no, friendship is without its hiccups. The episode goes as follows. We open up on Lyra and Bonbon as Bonbon receives a letter from Sunbud herself calling the agents of the Anti-Monster Agency back together to answer a new threat. Man. See, some rando falls through the EQG portal by accident. He's turned into a pony, but it's pretty obvious that this isn't his true form, and now he's stuck here trying to find his way back home. No duh. This, of course, risks the secrecy of the EQG portal, but the AMA and equestrian government think that the best solution is to, instead of helping the human get back home in secrecy, imprison him so that he can never tell anyone about the portal or human land, and now the AMA is being reformed to do exactly that. Bonbon answers the call, and because her best friend Lyra knows a lot about humans, being obsessed with their mythology, she brings her along as a potential source of help for this new mission, of course forgetting to mention the details of said mission. Once they reach HQ, however, things start to deteriorate as Lyra, who is at first overjoyed to help this mission, realizes that the human is being treated as a threat, and so she decides she doesn't want any part of this, much to the chagrin of Bonbon, who's just trying to follow orders and is now forced to choose between her friend and her job. Though it is worth noting that the former choice probably carries a hefty punishment. She does hold sensitive intel after all. Bonbon chooses the latter and Lyra leaves. She eventually encounters the human and decides to help it, having her beliefs of its non-threatening nature confirmed. All the while, Bonbon was able to predict Lyra's actions, and so she and the AMA proceed to spy on / follow her as all this transpires. Lyra and the human eventually become wise to the fact that they are being followed and try to slip away. This proves unsuccessful, however, and Lyra and the human come face to face with Bonbon and the AMA, who are at this point well aware of Lyra's behavior. Lyra manages to friendship speech Bonbon and the AMA into helping the human home instead of imprisoning poisoning him, however, not to mention out of being imprisoned herself. The anime does help the human home, Lyra and Bamba make up afterwards, and we get a wonderful moral about good friends being able to make up after a fight, which of course is overshadowed by spy episode fun. Moving on to Time Turner and Muffins, I actually have a really interesting idea for this. A lot of people are probably thinking Doctor Who anyway, so why not use that to our advantage? But I'm not thinking just any time travel story. I think the best way to use Muffins and Time Turner would be in a similar vein to the Star Wars spin-off The Adventures of Tag and Bink. For those who don't know, Tag and Bink is a tongue-in-cheek spin-off comic of Star Wars which explores many of the holes in the story. For example, why didn't Chewie get a medal? At some point in their journey, Tag and Bink find his medal hidden away and trampled. Part of me wonders if this is even less respectful, but regardless. A good example of applying this would be going back to Fame and Misfortune and showing Daring's reaction to having her identity exposed in that journal. Heck, that'd be a good conflict for an episode like this too, going through time in Equestria trying to rebuild a secret alias. I think having Time Turner and Muffins time travel through the show's history and making fun of its holes would be an enjoyable time. Maybe not the most grand use of time travel, but with how chaotic a plot device that tends to be, maybe a simple fun romp through history is a better idea. Not every episode can be some canon-altering marvel, and it shouldn't be. Sometimes a more simplistic, fun story is better, and having more of them will make the more canonically impactful episodes all the more so. This episode goes as follows. Muffins visits Time Turner for what we can assume to be a fun, friendly visit over Muffins, but he has his own problems to deal with. See, Daring Do is none too pleased that the main six accidentally revealed her alias for what it was with that whole journal thing, and now she wants Time Turner to help change the past and prevent her enemies from tracking her down. While initially opposed to this idea, Time is eventually convinced to help out. Cutting back to the present, Muffins decides to tag along, hoping to be helpful. Time Turner is likewise opposed to this at first, but eventually whittled down because fixing Daring's identity issue is a bit more important than arguing with a wall-eyed pony. They hop back to various points in the series where we get similar holes and of course see a lot of comedy. As you can see, this episode isn't really focused on the details. As I said earlier, just a fun romp through the past. It's not meant to be taken seriously, so the specifics aren't quite as important. Since friendship lessons are still a thing here, we can have these scenes slowly establish that Time Turner thinks he doesn't need Muffin's help, only for it to turn out that he does and wouldn't succeed without her. Yes, it's cliche, but that's not really the focus. The focus, as stated earlier, is more in having fun with the premise, so of course that's going to carry the moral this time around. Eventually, they manage to make their way to the journal just before Twilight finds it again and decides to publish it. Using a technological doohickey, they remove the compromising info without changing the rest of the related entries, and it can be this if you really want the reference. Time checks his ego and thanks Muffins for her help as they return to the slightly altered present, and if we want to have a bookend, we could throw in some other weird change and blame the butterfly effect. Moving on to our musical friends, I'm going to take a probably obvious answer and say that I'd like to see an episode focusing on Vinyl's apparent muteness. But first we have to ask what role that muteness will play, and the answer I think lies in the way it affects the relationship between Vinyl and Octi. This is something that has been rather ambiguous until now. The relationship I see between them, however, is not a ship or simple friendship, or even sisterhood, though my idea does leave room for those. It's a bit of a different take on the relationship, but an aspect I think would be very interesting to explore. That idea is one of, for lack of a better word, reliance. I see this episode following Vinyl on a normal day and how being mute affects her life. Her relationship with Octavia is multifaceted. While the two often step on each other's hooves, there's a reason they stick together. I think Vinyl relies on Octavia to be able to communicate. Specifically, Octavia is the only one who can understand her well and convey what she can't say effectively, albeit to Vinyl's chagrin. This could be further compounded by Vinyl's attempts to be independent. We are talking about a night DJ after all, and how those attempts end for her. Obviously not very well, that kind of undermine the story. Being as this episode focuses on Vinyl not talking, it should likewise have very little dialogue and mostly tell its story through imagery and animation. Taking show don't tell to what for MLP is a whole new level. The reliance on each other also brings a different meaning to the magic of friendship ideals the show so proudly touts. While this episode would be a simple one, it'd also be a very emotional one, and I think one that could rival the impact of Perfect Pair if done correctly. Alternatively, if just a simple day in the life story is too simple, we could have Vinyl's muteness cause a problem that Octavia would have to help her fix, and we get a conflict between Vinyl trying to solve the problem on her own and Octi knowing it won't end well, likely making the situation worse. But the reason I didn't go for that idea is that it'd be treading a lot of old ground from apple bucking season. The episode is as follows. We open on the sun rising over the split house, first seen in Slice of Life. We see that Vinyl sleeps late as we cut in on Octavia pretty much being ready for the day and doing some minor chore while Vinyl only now wakes up. This contrast immediately sets up the differing personalities between the two, which is unnecessary for us as fans but helps in a storytelling sense. We cut to the two enjoying having a shared day off, going out for breakfast. We see the first hint of our protagonist's struggle as she tries and fails to order non-verbally, with Octavia eventually just doing the talking for her. This basic cycle repeats with different events throughout the day, with with Vinyl becoming visually more and more frustrated and depressed each time until she eventually storms off to spend the day alone, catching Octavia off guard. We follow Vinyl as she tries to do basic tasks that require talking and completely failing. For example, we could have some stranger ask her for directions to somewhere in Ponyville. She tries to answer non-verbally, but this new visitor doesn't understand and isn't exactly feeling patient or understanding. Eventually he storms off, dismissing Vinyl as rude or insane for refusing to talk, completely unaware that Vinyl is in fact incapable of speech despite her trying to inform him. Finally, she's left sitting alone on a bench as Octavia finally catches up to her, delivering the ASAP about knowing your limits. In response, Vinyl apologizes for storming off for no reason, non-verbally of course. Octavia is obviously forgiving, again there's a reason she sticks around to help her, but she also has a surprise for Vinyl. We end the episode on Vinyl DJing for a night party that Octavia helped organize in spite of her distaste for the culture of such gatherings, closing off on a positive note for Vinyl in her musical elements. But what do you think? Maybe I'm brilliant, maybe I'm crazy, or maybe I just missed something obvious. Let me know either way. Thanks for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share. This is Onyx the Dragon, signing out.